Today, we journey into a nearly forgotten chapter of Chinese history, one buried beneath the shadows of frontier mountains and imperial neglect. This is the story of the Great Qiang Rebellion, a fierce and protracted uprising that erupted during the troubled reign of Emperor An in the year AD 107. At this time, the mighty Han Dynasty, once the unchallenged master of East Asia, was beginning to crumble from within. Corruption festered in the court, eunuchs pulled the strings behind the throne, and the central government grew ever more distant from the outer reaches of the empire. On the windswept western frontier, the Qiang tribes, long pushed to the margins, burdened by heavy taxes and military abuse, finally had enough. They rose, not just in protest, but in open rebellion. But the empire would not let them go unchallenged. Riding out from the troubled province of Liang, the Han dispatched Liang, a hard-bitten general known as much for his strict discipline as for his iron resolve. He marched into the wild, unforgiving terrain of the northwest, into the heartland of a people who had nothing left to lose. There, he would meet tens of thousands of Qiang warriors in a brutal campaign that would leave the frontier forever changed. This is not just a tale of rebellion, but of resistance, reprisal, and survival on the edge of empire. Before the armies of Han reached the far edges of the known world, the mountains and plateaus of the west were home to a proud and ancient people, the Qiang. The Qiang were not a single tribe, but a wide network of semi-nomadic pastoralists spread across the rugged highlands of the Longxi, Wudu, Jincheng, and Shihai commanderies, roaming even into the frontier zones of Anding and Beidi. These were the lands where they herded sheep, cattle, and horses, following seasonal pastures along the river valleys and mountain passes. They moved with the seasons, following water and pasture, raising sheep, horses, and cattle in the harsh, beautiful terrain of China's western frontier. According to the Han Dynasty dictionary, Shuowenjizi, compiled in the 2nd century AD, the word Qiang literally meant shepherds of sheep. This simple yet revealing description captured their core identity: herders, warriors, and free people of the highlands. To the Han, the Qiang were both a thorn and a tool. Some clans were recruited into Han armies as auxiliaries, others settled under imperial oversight. But these arrangements rarely lasted. Land disputes, cultural misunderstandings, and heavy-handed officials bred deep resentment. By the Eastern Han period, tensions flared into violence again and again. The Qiang rebelled, not just for land, but for survival, dignity, and autonomy. These were not simple raiders, but proud tribes fighting to defend their way of life. By the first half of the 2nd century AD, the Han Dynasty still claimed to rule all under heaven, but in truth, its grasp was weakening. At court, eunuchs and corrupt officials drained the power of the throne, while ordinary people across the empire suffered under heavy taxes, land seizures, and a growing sense of injustice. But nowhere was this pressure felt more fiercely than on the empire's western frontier. There, in the wild lands of Anding and Beidi commanderies, the Han had long struggled to dominate the Qiang tribes, the proud and diverse people who refused to bow to imperial rule. What was once an uneasy alliance had turned into simmering hostility. The Chinese position in the far west was fragile. In the autumn of AD 106, shortly after the new regency government was established following the death of Emperor He, General Renshang found himself besieged by rebels in Shul, modern-day Kashgar, the outermost point of Han control. In response, he sent an urgent request for assistance. The senior colonel Liang was authorized to assemble a relief force composed mainly of Qiang and other non-Chinese groups from Liang province. Although the siege was lifted before Liang arrival, Renshang was nevertheless dismissed from his post. His replacement, Duanxi, proved no more effective, and unrest soon spread to Chuzi, modern Kuka. Faced with ongoing instability and reluctant to commit additional resources to such a remote and difficult region, the regent dowager ultimately decided to order a full withdrawal from the area. Even the process of retreat required a significant short-term effort. Liang had already gathered 5,000 Qiang and other tribal fighters from the commanderies along the Gansu corridor, namely Dunhuang, Jiuquan, Zhangye, and Wu Wei. To assist with the withdrawal, Cavalry Commandant Wang Hong was tasked with recruiting an additional force from the commanderies of Jincheng, Longxi, and Hanyang. This second group numbered only a few hundred to around 1,000 men, and they were not expected to serve for more than a few months. However, the recruitment was carried out hastily and poorly. The conscripts believed they were being sent into indefinite exile. When they reached Jiuquan, they mutinied and scattered in an attempt to return home. As officials tried to capture the deserters, their efforts escalated into a widespread crackdown on non-Chinese communities, which in turn fueled rumors and fear further east. Worried about possible reprisals, some tribes, including the Qiang, fled back beyond the frontier to their former lands. Meanwhile, other groups turned hostile, attacking nearby Chinese settlements. According to the Qianfu Lun and the Hohan Shu, the early phase of the rebellion in the latter half of AD 107 was marked by considerable disorder and confusion. After the Xiaodong tribe fled beyond the frontier, those Qiang who remained were largely long-settled communities with limited experience in warfare and poor equipment. Initially, the rebels fought using simple weapons such as wooden or bamboo sticks and staves, along with shields made from similar materials. Some are even reported to have carried bronze mirrors, hoping that sunlight reflecting off them would create the illusion of metal weaponry. Their Chinese neighbors were similarly poorly armed, suggesting that the conflict was a desperate and chaotic struggle between ill-equipped forces. Early in the unrest, the Xianlian chieftain Dianlian, leader of a small group in western Longxi, allied with the Zhang tribe to launch an attack on the Long Road. The weapons and supplies they seized from various garrison posts significantly enhanced their military capabilities. As a result, Dianlian emerged as the leader of a broader tribal alliance. By the time Deng Zhi and his forces arrived in Hanyang during the winter, nearly all of Liang province had fallen into rebellion. The Imperial force was planned to consist of approximately 50,000 men, centered around the 5 professional regiments of the Northern Army. This corps was supplemented by militia drawn from several regions: Taiyuan and Shangdang in Bing province, Runan and Yingchuan in Yu province, Nanyang in Jing province, as well as areas surrounding the 2 capitals, Luoyang and Chang'an. However, many of these troops came from internal commanderies of the empire and generally lacked military training and experience in organized formation-based combat. As a result, during this early campaign, the regular imperial forces were largely unsuccessful. The strategy was for Deng Zhi to take control of Hanyang Commandery, located west of the Long Pass, and to use it as a base to advance against the rebels. However, even before Deng Zhi had fully assembled his forces, Dianlian and the Zhang tribe launched an attack early in AD 108 on the imperial outposts west of Ji City, the capital of Hanyang. They successfully pushed back the imperial army. This was followed by several months of relative calm until winter, when Ren Shang was ordered to launch an offensive. He suffered a severe defeat in the northern part of the commandery, losing 8,000 men and being forced onto the defensive. Subsequently, Deng Zhi was promoted to general-in-chief and recalled to the capital, likely to prevent further embarrassment. Ren Shang was left to maintain the defensive line as best as he could. Buoyed by their victories, Dianlian declared himself with an imperial title and established his capital at Lingzhou in Beidi, located on the Yellow River south of present-day Yinchuan in Ningxia. The Xianlian and their Zhang allies controlled the commanderies of Anding and Beidi. They were also allied with the Shenlang tribe in Wudu to the south and received support from other Qiang groups in the commanderies of Shang and Shihe to the east. Meanwhile, Liang had returned with his forces from the western regions and re-established control over the commanderies along the Gansu corridor, stretching from Jiangye to Wuwei, including Jiuquan, where the original unrest had begun. Unlike the troops recruited by Wang Hong, the auxiliary forces raised by Liang remained loyal, and local chieftains came forward to reaffirm their allegiance. As a result, this region remained stable and did not cause further problems. The government instructed Liang to establish a garrison camp in Jincheng, near present-day Lanzhou. However, upon learning that the Qiang threatened Chang'an, he moved south and east instead. Following the long road through Hanyang, Liang engaged the Qiang forces in Yufufeng and, in a series of battles near Meiyang, approximately 100 kilometers from the former capital, he successfully defeated and scattered the enemy. This was a significant accomplishment, and despite being wounded during the fighting, Liang was promoted to general command against the rebels. Nonetheless, the impact of his victory was short-lived. Communications with the northwest remained vulnerable to interruption. The Xining Valley in western Jincheng was isolated and faced shortages of grain, and further south, the Shenlang tribe from Wudu crossed the mountains to raid Hanzhong, where they defeated and killed the local administrator. The situation worsened significantly in AD 109. In the west, the Zhang tribe destroyed Lintao, the capital of Longxi, while the Qiang in the Xining Valley rebelled, capturing Poqiang and gaining control over the region. At the same time, the rebels renewed their advance toward Chang'an. Ren, the commandant of cavalry, led local levies to defend the city. Although he suffered several defeats, the city's defenses ultimately held. Meanwhile, Qiang raiding parties crossed the Taihang Mountains, reaching as far as the Zhao and Wei regions on the North China Plain. In the winter at the end of the year, the Shan Yutan of the Xiongnu also rebelled in Shihe. Although unrelated to the Qiang, he formed an alliance with the Wuhuan to the northeast. Liang was able to suppress this rebellion within a few months, but his campaign required 20,000 troops. In comparison, the government's response to the Qiang Rebellion remained much weaker. Up to this point, the Imperial forces had achieved little success against the rebels. The initial response relied on direct attacks aimed at crushing the insurgents, but many troops were poorly trained and ill-prepared. As a result, these offensives quickly stalled, reducing the government's efforts to merely holding defensive positions. Recognizing that victory would be difficult, the strategy shifted in AD 110. Most conscripts from the inner commanderies, who had performed poorly under Deng Zhi and his successors, were dismissed. Ren Shang was assigned command of Chang'an along with his most experienced soldiers. Simultaneously, to strengthen the defense and serve as a training center for militia forces, a Tiger Tooth commandant position was established in Jingzhou Commandery, based at Chang'an. The existing garrison at Yang and Yufufeng was placed on the front line, reflecting the changing nature of the conflict. A clear sign of the failure of the previous policy occurred in the autumn, when the levies under the command of Ren, who had suffered repeated defeats against the Qiang, refused to follow further orders to launch attacks. Although discipline was quickly restored, Ren was recalled to Luoyang and later died in prison. Early in the following year, AD 111, his superior officer Ren Shang was also dismissed due to his lack of success, although he faced no additional punishment. In reality, it is likely that the main issue was not with the commanders themselves, but with the poor training and inexperience of the troops they were required to lead. At this time, serious debate arose within the imperial court over whether the northwest region should be entirely abandoned. Following the rebellion of AD 109, the Xining Valley in western Jincheng had largely fallen out of government control. In AD 110, the capital of the commandery was relocated from Yuanya to Xiangwu, in the eastern part of Longxi, while the headquarters of the protector of the Qiang was moved north to Jiangye. The internuncio Pang Can, who had briefly held command near Chang'an, went further by arguing that the government should withdraw from the entirety of Liang province. He pointed out that the territory was highly unstable, suffering from repeated raids and rebellions by the Qiang. Additionally, the financial and resource costs required to maintain an imperial presence in the region placed excessive strain on more secure and settled commanderies elsewhere. The dowager's brother, Longxi, who had direct experience with the situation, supported Pang Can's recommendations for withdrawal. However, Yu Shu, a gentleman cadet who had served as a clerical officer under the Grand Commandant Li Shu, argued against this view. He convinced Li Shu that it was a sacred duty to defend the lands held by previous generations and to protect the dynasty's ancestral tombs, emphasizing that the barbarians must be kept under control. Li Shu then secured the backing of the other senior officials, leading to the abandonment of the plan for a full retreat. Instead, efforts were made to involve the leading local families more closely in regional administration, aiming to strengthen control and stability in the area. Despite these efforts, in the spring of AD 111, further withdrawals took place. The headquarters of the Anding, Beidi, and Shang commanderies were relocated to Yufufeng and Zuopingyi, while the administration of Longxi moved eastward to join that of Jincheng in Xiangwu. In many regions, local populations were forced to abandon their homes and farms. Although Pang Can had advocated for an orderly relocation process, including assistance and concessions for those moving to more secure areas, historical accounts from the Qianfu Lun and Ho Han Shu describe a far harsher reality. Soldiers were reportedly sent to destroy the homes of those unwilling to leave. Refugees were driven away through violence, subjected to robbery and looting, and left abandoned without support or protection. Although some areas may have remained under imperial control, and no official decision was made to abandon the territory, Dianlian and his rebel Qiang forces effectively controlled a large region. This area stretched from the Xining Valley eastward to the southern course of the Yellow River, between present-day Shanxi and Shanxi provinces, and from the harsh Ordos Desert southward to the Wei River Valley and the approaches to Chang'an. Hanyang remained contested territory. Imperial control over Longxi was weak, and the Shenlang tribe of Wudu continued to conduct raids through the mountains into Hanzhong, where they killed a second administrator in battle. In AD 111, raiding parties expanded eastward across the Yellow River toward the Taihang Mountains and south into the regions of Henei and Heidong, located just across the river from the capital commandery of Henan. In response, the territories of the plains facing the Taihang Ranges, from Zhongshan Kingdom in the north to Wei Commandery in the south, were ordered to strengthen their defenses. Approximately 600 forts were established to secure all possible approaches from the surrounding highlands. Meanwhile, the main force of the Northern Army was recalled from the western frontier to defend the Meng crossing of the Yellow River, located north of Luoyang. Ren Shang was placed in command and led an attack against a Qiang group at Sheep's Head Mountain in Shangdang. Although the victory was modest, with the enemy suffering only about 200 casualties, it effectively removed the immediate threat to Luoyang. Following this, the army stationed at Meng Crossing was withdrawn, and imperial forces gradually reasserted control over Henei, Heidong, and the adjacent commanderies of Bing Province. With a subtle build-up to the final line. By AD 111, the rebellion had shaken the Han Empire to its core. The Qiang still held firm under their leader Dianlian, defiant in the highlands. Though the tide had begun to shift, the war was far from over. As the frontier smoldered, a final reckoning loomed on the horizon, but that is a story for another day.